Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi everybody, and I hope that you're having a great week wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to another episode of The Art of Procurement, and thank you very much for sharing your time in the gym or your commute, wherever you may be. I really appreciate you putting me into your earbuds and listening to the show. Well, after the big idea week from the past, more than a week really, a week and a half, it's normal service being resumed today. I really do hope that you enjoyed the mini shows. It was certainly very interesting for me to talk to the guests that I was able to talk to. It was also pretty hectic in putting all that together in a pretty short period of time. But I'd really be interested to hear what you think. Is it too much content? Do you prefer the longer form interviews versus the short form? Should I continue to mix it up a bit? I'd really love to hear what you think. All right, well, on today's show, I'm going to be talking to somebody from outside the world of procurement. Well, I say outside, kind of outside the world of procurement. And my guest today is Anna Spady. Anna is the marketing manager and inbound strategist for RFP 365. You might recall that I recently interviewed Anna's boss, RFP 365 co-founder Dave Hulston, on the show probably a month or so ago. And actually, you can go back and hear that episode at artofprocurement.com/RFP. So as I put that show together, I came into contact with Anna for the first time and some of Anna's work. And I've always thought that we could learn a lot in procurement from people on the outside of our function. And in the case of Anna, she's really got a lot to share with regards to how you can really help to engage with stakeholders and compel stakeholders to engage in a non-threatening way. After all, as an inbound marketing strategist, that's really Anna's job. It's to encourage prospects to engage with her and her company on their terms rather than feel that they're being sold to. It's a really great interview, and I hope that you like it. At the end of the interview, Anna actually turns the tables on me and puts me on the spot on some of my thoughts. So, listen out for that, and I hope that I didn't make too much of a fool of myself. Well, before we get into that conversation with Anna, I do want to remind you that if you haven't done already, you can download our free report. It's the 21 tips to help you secure your dream procurement job. So this has been a really popular report. It's been downloaded an awful lot, and it's really a summary of tips and tricks that cover the entire job search process. And it was compiled from interviews that we've had with recruitment specialists on the art of procurement. To sign up to receive the report, and what we'll do also is notify you every time a new episode is published, and also give you a list of a few of our back episodes that are popular as a way to start if you're new to the show. You can do all that by going to artofprocurement.com/subscribe and just entering your email address in the pop-up box there. All right, well, with all that being said, let's roll the tape. So hi, Anna, and thanks for joining me today on The Art of Procurement.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you on the show, and really excited for our conversation today. I actually talked a little bit about your background and how we connected just in the introduction before the music rolled, but I'm sure that I didn't do it justice. So I'd just love if you can explain what an inbound marketing strategist really is.
Absolutely. Well, if marketing wasn't vague enough and didn't confuse people enough, almost as bad as I think the word procurement does, I make it even more complicated by tacking on the inbound part. But basically, my job is to stand out in the crowd by providing prospects with something that is valuable. Mm-hmm. And that usually looks like content, like blogs, that solves a question that they're trying to solve or a problem that they have that then intrigues them about our company. So at the end of my day, my job is to get my company found on Google, to write things people actually want to read. That's basically it in a nutshell.
And so when you look at the two main marketing channels, and there's outbound and inbound, what's the main differences between the two?
That's a great question. So outbound marketing and outbound sales is this very kind of cold calling model where you're sort of this gatekeeper of information, mm-hmm. and it's kind of secretive. Whereas inbound is this much more warmer human connection saying, hey, you don't necessarily need to be interested in my company. I'm going to help you regardless. And in doing that, you actually prove yourself to be really valuable and trustworthy, as opposed to coming at you hard and cold calling you from the get-go.
And what changed that made inbound approaches, I guess both in sales and marketing, the area to invest in, or to at least consider, as well as the old traditional outbound approaches? Is it just attention spans? Is it technology?
Absolutely. The internet made a huge difference, because back before the internet, you really were a gatekeeper of knowledge. If you knew about a product, nobody else really had access to that information. But now you can Google my company's reviews, you can Google how many employees we have. So the position has really changed from being this kind of secretive gatekeeper to being a guide. So part of it is the access to internet, and part of it is just market saturation. There's so many more options, so you really have to stand out, and you stand out by being non-salesy, basically.
Yeah, you don't want to be, you want to be the person that helps rather than the person that pushes a message down somebody's throat.
Exactly.
So before we start, I just wanted to give some context to why I thought it would be a really relevant discussion for procurement professionals. And we talk a lot about the fact that procurement's changing, and that those are being successful, I think, in the future, are professionals that have the ability to really to influence others and build strong relationships. And that's both internally and also kind of within your ecosystem externally, of suppliers, of folks in the media, of influencers, of whoever it may be. When I think about the skills, and we hear this from a number of different guests on the show, people skills are becoming at least as important, I think, if not more so, than technical skills. And there's really an acute talent shortage for procurement professionals that have a combination of both soft skills and technical skills. So I think it's really important that we look outside of our function and look at what some of the best practices are to figure out how we can apply those to procurement and to be a better procurement person, a better procurement professional. So I have a first question around that, and that's, why, from your perspective, should a CPO or a procurement professional listen to a marketer?
It is because, as you said, the real kind of problem facing procurement are those soft people skills. Mm-hmm. And I've been following that conversation as well. And I actually read an article on procurement leaders lately saying the biggest skills gap were in the ability to communicate and the ability to persuade.
Right.
Well, obviously that's what marketing is all about, is this ability to say, hey, I understand what you value, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm not going to conflict with your values, but rather I'm going to appeal to them and find that common ground. Mm-hmm. And that is what a marketer should do. And I think what procurement has to learn how to do as well is to say, not only are the things that what I care about, like spend analysis or cost management or risk, but to also say to somebody else, another stakeholder, I know you value X, I'm going to appeal to your value system as well, and we're going to learn how to work together.
And so how do you figure out what is important to somebody?
That's a great and complicated question. A lot of it is putting yourself in their shoes and just being intentional about it. Every time I sit down to write something, the official word for it is to create a persona. Mm-hmm. And that is literally a snapshot of who are you, what do you do in a given day, what are your problems, what are your headaches, what are your challenges, what do you care about, what keeps you up at night. And so marketers do that in this very formal way called a persona. But I think on a more simple human level, it's just to say, hey, what does this person care about, and how can I partner with them in it while still meeting my goals as well?
From at an individual level, how do you find out what's important?
I think a lot of it is honest conversations and being more open and coming with less of an agenda. Having dialogues that ask questions like, if we only get one thing done, or if I could help you with one thing, what would that be? And when I think you kind of put aside your agenda for a moment and you ask some more open-ended questions, you find out a lot. A lot of what I have to do is to put aside my assumptions about what I think our customers want and need, and to just call them and mm-hmm. ask them, or to see what they're complaining about. And I think that relates as well. You kind of have to put aside your assumptions and really listen.
You mentioned something there about having less of an agenda. Is that something that surprises people? Do people know how to take that? Like, there must be something in it for you.
I think they're very suspicious. And that's where transparency is a big part of it. You say, hey, obviously I'm a marketer. Obviously, I would like you to choose our product. But even if you don't, that's okay. And let's figure out what your best interest is. That's actually a lesson I learned from my grandfather, who was an insurance salesman.
Right.
And he actually won awards and was really, really good at it because, as he put it, he was genuinely interested in prospects' best interest, because if they were the best fit, then they were a great customer and they were happy and he was happy. And if they were a bad fit, then they weren't a lemon and they didn't come and complain and cause a ruckus. So he took it kind of from that approach, and it ended up being highly profitable for him. So that's kind of a model I follow as well.
Yeah, and from a procurement perspective, when you think about knowing who your persona is, and in this case it'll be a stakeholder, I think that we can do a lot of analysis with data that we have to figure out who are the people we should be talking to, who are the people we should be targeting. I think that it's not you don't want to go and be everything to all people, but there's certain people within your organization who are influencers or are key stakeholders that control a lot of spend. Those are the people that you need to target, not trying to target everybody. And I think that's probably where the concept in marketing terms of a persona comes in, is knowing who it is that you want to talk to.
Exactly. It's highly, highly targeted. And the more targeted you can be, exactly as you were saying, the more relevant you are. If you try to be all things to all people, it comes off as very wishy-washy, as very generic. People can tell you haven't done your homework. They can tell it's not authentic. We all as human beings have an excellent radar for that. But when you are targeted and intentional, and you've listened and you've paid a little bit of attention, and you say things like, hey, I hear you saying this, or I hear people in your position like you complaining about this or struggling with this or wanting to improve this. Does that sound familiar? When you start using those highly specific statements, people say, yes, absolutely, that's me. And you kind of have your foot in the door at that point to begin the conversation.
And with our stakeholders, so we'll know who they are as individuals, because we can just, it's easier than you're trying to look at a pool of maybe millions of potential prospects and find somebody that fits a certain characteristic. Whereas with our procurement stakeholders, we know who they are as an individual, but we can't necessarily get in front of them. So how do you mentioned about having less of an agenda and understanding what motivates them. How do you understand what motivates them when you don't, it's kind of a chicken and an egg, when you don't have the opportunity to talk to them in the first place?
I am a shameless stalker. And by that, I mean, when I research a new target market, I will find a client or a colleague that I know is the kind of person I want to work with, or even that person specifically. And I start looking at their LinkedIn, and I start looking at their Twitter, and I watch what are the themes of what these people are speaking about or speaking to. Or if I'm in a meeting with them, I pay really close attention to what topics they bring up, and either doing it online with social media or doing it in a team context, or even what kind of emails they send out. You start to sort of see the pattern of, okay, this is clearly a key interest to them, and this is clearly a pet topic or a hobby horse for them. And it becomes a lot easier to know what might interest them after that.
So it's more than just, trying to get a one-on-one meeting with them, for example. You need to increase the size of your radar, and by the sounds of it, include a lot of things that may not be traditional tools or the, internal information that you may have within the company, but look at them from an outsider perspective and see what they're doing online, in the days that you can pretty much follow and track anybody.
Absolutely. And in my experience, people appreciate the effort. If you say to them, hey, I know you don't know me, or I know that I'm a junior in the company, or whatever the caveat may be, but I've done this and that and the other, and here's what I think you're working on or would like to see improve. Am I right? In my experience, people tend to appreciate that effort and give you a moment of their time, whether it be a 10-minute phone call or a 5-minute pitch for a new idea you have or whatever. When you've done your homework, it's really difficult not to listen to someone if they're coming at you very reasonably.
Right. And you talked about that you want to genuinely help them as the way to kind of get in the door, if you will, and to make yourself relevant to them. What are some of the ways that you can go about doing that?
No, it's a great question. So finding like a common area of interest is great. So like when I work with people or I find like a prospect that I'm kind of interested in, I'll approach them and say something like, "Hey, would you want to write a guest blog? It would be great exposure for you guys and we would love to pick your brain a little bit." And I come at them with this idea of obviously there's something for me in it and my company will get some views or we'll get some exposure out of it, but also like what can we do that makes it worth their time? Okay, we can partner up on this project, or if they can give me an introduction, I'll give them an introduction. So I just sort of think through what can I bring to the table with me in my request.
Do you bring, information or perhaps industry thinking, basically content that's not directly related to what it is that you're trying to do for them, but that would be of use to them? Is that a way that you could do it? Because I'm thinking about a stakeholder. You're trying to engage with stakeholders who may not want to engage with you. Well, they may be responsible for buying, or maybe not for buying, sorry, there may be a stakeholder within HR, for example. We'll bring them information that you may have found related to their job in HR that has something related to purchasing or procurement, but that's not what you want to talk to them about. Is that a way of building kind of trust with them and getting on their radar?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we actually at one point hired a PR consultant to work with the company and kind of give me some tips on how do you engage bigger press organizations and things like that when they get so many requests a day. And she said something I thought was really practical. She said, one great way to sort of woo a reporter or someone you want to connect with is see what they care about via social media and such, and then send them things you think would be helpful, be it an article or a resource or, like you were saying, a curation of information. And you slowly build up that rapport of, hey, this is someone who is a resource to me, or you offer to help them with an ongoing project. So if that's like a stakeholder, I would even say something like, hey, I know you're working on this project. Is there some data or some research you need or some statistics that would be helpful? I'd be happy to go find that for you. So if that's providing information or helping out in some way, it just shows that you are truly a trustworthy partner in the process.
And you need to invest the time in being able to do it. It's not something that you can do.
No, and it's hard work. There's no shortcut. I wish there was. My job is hard, and doing it right is extremely hard. That's why it's competitive. But no, unfortunately, there is no shortcut that I know of.
Okay, so one of the things you mentioned was transparency. And I think that, we often have our own agendas when we go and talk to stakeholders, and we're not necessarily clear on what they are because, that's just our way of trying to influence them. I'm guessing that you don't think that that cloak and daggers approach is the right one, that you need to put all your cards on the table up front.
You do, and it's really as simple as, would you like it if somebody came to you cloak and dagger and tried to convince you of something? And I think almost all of us would say, no, of course not. So what would we appreciate? Well, we would appreciate someone being honest and genuine and helpful and authentic from the get-go, and not pretending that it's completely altruistic. If I reach out to somebody, I'm not going to pretend that I'm just there to say nice things to them or solve all of their problems without any self-interest. I'll make it clear what my end goal is. But I think it's prioritizing whether or not it's a good fit, or whether or not you can find genuine common ground in the midst of your agenda that kind of puts people at ease. Because when they see all their cards on the table, I think their defenses go down and they say, okay, I knew you were selling me something, or I knew you had an agenda. Great. Now that I know what it is, and now that I know it's reasonable, I'll relax and listen to what you have to say. Whereas if you don't address the elephant in the room, I don't think anyone really relaxes until you do. So something I see our sales guys do is they'll often talk about with prospects like pricing right off the bat, because it's the elephant in the room, and they know they won't focus until they do anyway. So they might as well get it out of the way.
Yeah, and by whatever their reaction is, tells you whether it's worthy of investing the time in a future conversation anyway. Exactly.
I think of it kind of like a first date where you sort of get it all out on the table from the beginning and then see if you want to go on a second date.
So from a stakeholder, you would say, look, I think that I can help you. I can help you in these ways, but I'm not here to do that. I'm here to show you that, I do more than that, or I can bring more value than that. Giving them the idea that you are here to help them and you want a long-term business relationship with them to achieve your goals, but you're not here to push them to do that today. You're here to make them comfortable. The fact that, you're going to take the right approach to help them do that. And then you're not a threat, basically.
Absolutely. You want the best fit for both of you, and I think they sense that.
And so one of the things I'm interested in, I think that as procurement professionals, we often have what we think are some great ideas, and they always fall on deaf ears, especially when we're talking to stakeholders. And I keep bringing stakeholders up, but, we'll go to conferences, we'll hear what other companies are doing, we'll hear from suppliers, maybe what other clients are doing with them, and we'll take that back to our stakeholder, and it falls on deaf ears. So how can you ensure or how can you increase the chances that they're going to listen to you?
No, it's a great question. And I actually was reading about that recently in a great article on LinkedIn called Why No One Is Listening to Your Great Idea. And the title completely caught me because I think we've all felt that way at some point or another. Why aren't they listening? And it was a really great read on basically it is your job to make them listen. It's not their job to stop, drop in whatever they're doing. Right. You don't want to interrupt them, but you want to add to what they're doing. So they gave some great practicals that I'll quote of kind of how to phrase questions or what to ask yourself before you pitch to them. I think where a lot of people make the mistake is they don't come prepared. They wait until they're frustrated with an internal process or they're angry that they don't have enough of whatever they need or that something's not changing in the company. So they come off as very aggressive and emotional and unreasonable. Whereas if you plan out what you're going to say ahead of time and you think about how to partner with them, you come very organized and very cool and collected, and it sets you up for a better conversation. So some of the suggestions they gave of sort of what to ask yourself is, how does my idea help us accomplish something we're already striving for? So you're not coming with a completely fresh, stop everything we're doing agenda, but hey, how does this actually resonate with what we're already doing? They also recommended, how does this shed light on a new or old frustrating problem? How does it connect to a deeper or core value that we're already resonating with? So what it's kind of all getting at is, how can I kind of piggyback on to what we're already doing and add to the kind of collective decisions or the collective value rather than divert them and make everyone think we have our own agenda.
So it's really it's making it about them. I took a couple of notes there. It's about them. It's about their challenges.
Yes.
And making sure that you're aligned with what they want to achieve rather than trying to come to them with essentially what your objectives are that may be conflicting with them.
Yes, absolutely. We're all very basically selfish. So my favorite thing to talk about is me. So if you come to me wanting to talk about me, I'm much more likely to listen.
Well, one of the areas that I want to go into, and it's kind of a switch from talking specifically about inbound marketing to more general marketing practices, is that I think as procurement professionals, I certainly know from my past experience, I'll do what I think is a great job of something and it gets great results. I do it with my head down and think that everyone around me is going to look at me and think, well, those are some great results. Didn't Phil do a great job? And in reality, it's like nobody even noticed what I did. I think that maybe it's just the nature of, we're a lot more data analytical kind of heads down people that we struggle with self-promotion. It's not something that comes naturally. So I'm interested kind of with your marketing perspective and, obviously very extroverted perspective rather than introvert like I am and a lot of procurement people are. How can we use marketing techniques really to demonstrate our value using, on whatever our past results are? Maybe it's by telling stories, but essentially getting ourselves noticed.
No, it's a great question. And I think there's this sort of feeling like it's not being humble to say you've done a good job. And it's something I've struggled with. I'm only a few years out of college, so you kind of feel like your job is to be head down and to, just work quietly and yes, please. But then I realized the salary my employers pay me is an investment, and they need to know whether that investment is paying off. So in many ways, it's not so much even about me tooting my own horn or not. It's about me quantifiably showing them as much as I can, hey, the investment you're making in me is paying off, and that should actually be part of what I consider my job and my job description to prove to them. So as a marketer, I'm definitely encouraged to do that because we live and die by our metrics.
Right.
I can tell you how many people click on an email I send, how many social media followers we got today, if our website visits are up and down. So the metrics part makes it definitely easy, but it's harder, I think, on a larger scale for most professionals to sort of quantify or to say their work is valuable. But I have learned a few tips being in the industry of kind of how you can do it. And as we sort of already said, I think the first part is to realize it truly is your job to convince your team you're valuable. And like you said, not to wait for them to sort of notice you and applaud. And I think for most people, that's where they get really stuck until they're really frustrated. So I'd say step one is realize it is your job. But after that, what you kind of are taught to do in marketing with anything, before you write something or before you persuade someone, the absolute first step is you paint the picture. So you say, here's the problem, here's the crisis, here's the risk that's facing our team or this industry. And you make it really, really simple, and you avoid as much jargon as you can. But your goal is to help them understand this need and how it affects or threatens them. And I think where most people get stuck is they just assume it's really obvious.
Yeah.
Like,
they've been hired for that reason, so why should I need to tell them that again?
Exactly. And it's really difficult to not think that it's just obvious and everyone's on the same page. But I can't tell you how many times my boss has asked me a question from something I was working on, 6 months ago or a year ago. It's like, oh, okay, apparently what I'm doing really isn't obvious enough, or what we're working with isn't obvious enough. So you really have to very explicitly paint this picture. So for me, it's coming to my bosses and saying something like, hey, we have a low search engine score. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And then this very critical part, meaning, assuming they don't know offhand, hey, a low search engine score means this. I explain very explicitly what that means to us is it's going to be very hard for prospects to find us or hear about our business. So you sort of paint this problem and then spell out this is how it will affect you. So a more general example might be because we don't have X protocol in place, this problem, we're highly vulnerable to risk in these 3 areas, meaning we have a potential liability and profit loss. So it's super, super explicit of there is this problem and here's how it could affect us.
Interesting. And that from a procurement perspective can be, we have a problem that we can't go to market in a particular area profitably because of cost issues or because our competitors have got access to supply-based innovation that we don't have access to. It can be a bunch of things that can go into demonstrating the value that we create that's over and above necessarily a financial metric.
Absolutely. So that was step one, painting this picture of the problem or risk. Obviously, you can't leave it there or everyone is just collectively stressed out. So the second part is you explain what you're doing about it. And this is something that took me a long time to learn. I don't tell my team we have a problem until I've thought about how we might approach it, because my job is to make their lives easier, not to make it harder. So once I've thought about the problems that we're experiencing and I've thought about what I am doing about it or what we could do about it, then I address that problem. So I say, I am addressing this by doing X research or X project or tracking this. So by waiting until you have a solution or a potential solution, you showcase yourself as this expert and resource. And it gives you this credibility and it puts everyone else at ease, and it puts you as the sort of go-to person for solving these problems. So in my earlier example, I would say, because our SEO score is so low, I'm going to spend 2 weeks doing keyword research and optimize the website and write 6 blogs based on those words. I would come with this very concrete plan. For someone in procurement, they might say something like, because I know reducing risk is one of our highest priorities, I'm going to make it my top project by doing this. Or because I know our industry needs this insight, I'm going to conduct X research to make sure we can all work more efficiently.
Yeah, and so that ties in the work that you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis with what the challenge is, and also makes your leadership recognize that you're not it's not something that you're wasting your time frivolously on. There's actually a reason that ties back to a key challenge or a key problem.
Exactly. And it's hardest tying it to a concrete benefit, as you very rightly stated. Often it's not a dollar amount, but you can tie it back to a concrete benefit like peace of mind or time or growth or opportunity. And your goal is to quantify it as much as possible. So you paint this picture of, hey, here's what we find valuable, and here's how I am part of that or contributing to that thing that we find valuable. So you would say to them, now that we've reduced our risk in this area by tackling this problem, we're able to focus our resources on growing this or expanding that. And that gives, again, a concrete example tying back to something that is hard to quantify. And that makes it just a little bit easier for them to kind of take hold of. But there are some other tips for boosting your credibility. We've talked about metrics a little bit. And the more you can make it specific, definitely the more credible you come off. When people meet me, the first question they typically ask, other than what is marketing or what does that really mean, is they say, tell me about your numbers. Tell me about your number of this or your number of that. And obviously that doesn't completely relate to procurement, but if you can say to somebody in your industry or in your team, we save on average X number of dollars or man hours or have increased productivity, even if it's an estimate, even if you can't tie it to some hard and fast rule, it at least gives them a ballpark or a scope. And it can be, I think it's probably hard for people in procurement to give estimates because they want things to be so, quantifiable and trackable, which is completely valid. But sometimes you have to just say, yeah, we would estimate that by doing this, we're going to increase our productivity by 5% just to get people to even listen to you.
Right. And that's how you would tie back a metric to something that's not necessarily a dollar amount, but at least that shows the value of what you're working on.
Exactly. When I work with case studies with clients, I just say, please estimate, by using our platform or by doing this thing, how many, has it saved you an hour a day? Has it saved you this? And again, this isn't hard data. No one's going to call them and ask them to verify it, but it just gives you a sense of, okay, this is a really big deal or this is a little bit of a big deal. Another thing you can do is thought leadership, and that could be speaking on a podcast like this. That could be writing on a blog or an article on an industry trend or common problem, or giving lessons born out of your work experience or your lessons and mistakes. And most people talk about thought leadership in the context of external and why that proves you as a leader in the industry, which is absolutely true. But I'll also add that it will give you more credibility even with your own team. In the last year, I've started doing more speaking on marketing and some more writing and kind of my own projects. And I've noticed my bosses taking some things I say more seriously and kind of standing up and paying attention. So it does cut both ways. Doing thought leadership things like an article, yes, it gives you credibility in your industry, but it can even give you credibility on your own team.
How about internal thought leadership? So rather than doing something that's maybe to the outside world, looking at a challenge or maybe something that's even happening, in the wider economy, but applying it very specifically to your company, only for internal eyes. Is that something that somebody can do to essentially increase their credibility internally and not on an outside view? It's just doing things, taking an initiative to do things that will create value for your internal company and some of your peers, some of your stakeholders, some of your leadership.
Absolutely. And it proves you are paying attention and you're monitoring things. And as you kind of do that, or even I'll often share articles about things our competitors are doing or things that I think might affect us in some way. And, by doing that, you, again, position yourself as this kind of go-to authority. Well, hey, Anna, what do you think about this thing that such and such is doing, or, whatever. So I think that's highly effective internally. It also shows that you are an innovator and that you get things done. Demonstrating any kind of initiative instantly gives you more credibility. If you can say to your team, I saw X was needed and I made it happen, you prove that you're somebody that's going to get things done.
So unfortunately, we're coming towards the end of the interview, and I know that we've covered a ton of stuff here. I wondered if you could just kind of summarize what the top 4 or 5 points are that you would like procurement professionals to take away from the conversation in terms of how they can apply what you do on a daily basis to helping them build and grow relationships with their internal stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say one big thing is knowing that being right or having a good idea isn't enough. Mm-hmm. It feels like it should be. And it should be. If this was, a completely democratic world, it would be. But frankly, it isn't. So I'm sure there are lots of people in procurement out there who have excellent ideas, who are doing all the right things, but aren't positioning it well. Mm-hmm. So my challenge to you would be to not only think about what it is that you're vying for, but to ask yourself how you can be best persuasive or how to position it to your team. Put yourself in their shoes and think about what their objections are going to be, how you can speak to those objections, what their values are, and how you can prove that you are contributing to those existing values rather than contradicting them. And doing this makes you resonate because it proves that not only are you a reasonable person, but you also really do understand and want to partner with your stakeholders. So it proves you as this very reasonable, trustworthy person. So if you can think about how you're positioning yourself, if you can show by either saying things you've heard them say or read them say that you truly do understand their values, and then to be as helpful and as transparent as you can, because it genuinely is profitable to say, this is my agenda, but I want to make sure that it also benefits you. And here's how I think we can approach that. So to be very honest about your agenda, to be transparent, but I would also challenge people to position themselves as helpful and to try to be helpful, because it does, as in any partnership, it works better when it's a two-way street. So as we've talked about, kind of how can you empower your stakeholders? How can you approach them getting done what you want to get done, but with an empowerment mentality? And then also, how can you prove you're valuable to your team? Because if they perceive you as being valuable, they are going to listen to you. They're going to take your ideas seriously. So to own that it is your job to prove that you're valuable by doing the things we've talked about, painting the picture of why what you're doing is so important, and then really, really explicitly explaining what you're doing about it and how that's benefiting the team, and then how it's helping them and giving them some kind of concrete benefit. So I've been really excited to join. I'm a big fan of Phil's show and have been following it for a while. And I'm going to completely put him on the spot because we've been working together for a few months now. I happen to know that while he is now the procurement guru, as y'all know and love him to be, I do know a little trivia about him, that his background, his degree is actually in marketing, or at least one of his degrees. So I have to ask you, Phil, now that I've put in my 2 cents about what procurement can learn from marketing, I'm going to ask you, what can they learn?
Well, that's very kind, first of all, and I'm not very good at taking compliments. I think that you put me on the spot, so let me have a think.
I'm giving you a chance to prove you're valuable to the industry.
Yeah, and hopefully I don't need to use the edit button to make it sound like I'm more intelligent than I really am. So I think that, what I've always focused on, and what my marketing background told me to focus on, and perhaps it's why I was fortunately pretty successful in building stakeholder relationships, it's all about the relationship. Relationship is a key word, and it's personal. It's not, take the business out of it, try and find an area of a common thread or a common goal, or just something that binds you together. I know it's something that you mentioned earlier. That's something that I was always really strongly focused on, is just something that ties you both together. It can be the fact that you both have similar interests, you're from the same place, you have worked in the same industry, just something that gives you a personal connection. Not everybody's going to respond to that, but I'd say 7, 8, 9 out of 10 people will respond to it. I think that approaching people in a non-confrontational way. So if you go and you're threatening and you're saying, I'm going to change the way things are done, or I'm going to show you how you should be doing what you're doing, or I'm just going to help you do what you're doing better. Mm-hmm. If you do that off the bat, then people are just going to close up shop. Mm-hmm. And they just don't want to listen to it because, they feel threatened by you. So just going there without the agenda that you talked about before, and providing them content that might help them, that is valuable to them, but that isn't necessarily directly related to your end goal, so that they can start to trust you. I would say that while I'm kind of aging myself, but it's been some time since I did my marketing degree, and a time when the internet was just about beginning. So I think a lot of things have changed, but those are some of the fundamentals I would say that I learned and that I try and apply, when I was working on the practitioner side.
No, that's a great point, and I like that you said it really is human, because I would say that's definitely something that I agree with and live by. That as far as we've come in technology with, procurement, automation, or software, or, even marketing technology, that it is still very much about human connection,
right.
And proving that as much as you can just makes you that much more persuasive.
Yeah, as they say, people do business with people.
Yep.
They don't do business with businesses.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
So how can listeners find you if they'd like to pick your brains a little bit more on what they can do in their jobs and maybe take some learning from you? How's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, no, you can contact me in a variety of ways. I'm highly Googleable, as I like to say, but I run our company blog, and I love seeing comments and readers on that. So that's going to be the RFP 365 blog. There's a whole section just for those in procurement. So I hope you check me out on there. And then if you are a Twitter person, my handle is Anna, A-N-A, Lim, L-I-M-B.
That's creative.
Yeah, it's a play on my name. My name's Anna Lynn, right. So that's a little punny for you. I'm sorry. Or you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Well, what I'll do is I'll link up to LinkedIn, to your Twitter, and to the RFP 365 blog in the show notes. And those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/marketing tips. That's artofprocurement.com/marketing tips. So, Anna, thank you again very much for participating in the show. It's been a really interesting, and I've certainly enjoyed the conversation. So I just thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. I love the show, and I look forward to hearing more.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.